I'm telling you, pre-show the show for our patrons.
For our listener.
No, not our Patreon patrons. For those who I would be obligated to purchase a beer for at a bar.
No, if somebody comes up anywhere in public, you can put, if you're recording this, put this in the stinger. If anybody comes up to me in public and says, hey, I listen to your show, Record Breakers, I will probably purchase them some sort of alcoholic beverage if they are of age and want one. If they are not, I will purchase them a nice bottle of Jones soda or Cheerwine, their choice.
Cheerwine's
A cactus cooler.
Buenos nachos, amigos. I'm pointing right in your faces. I'm Petey Rave. This is Record Breakers. You're with us to talk about music. Here with me, also to talk about music, we've got Brett.
Hard markets and nose.
Mm-hmm. We've got Patrick.
Scooters. Oh.
Hello.
And we've got Drew.
Apparently the last thing Craig Kilborn done was to guest host the Artie Lang show. 2013.
Wow, those are some has-been ass names.
Yes. Has been.
He tried to launch a
was.
show and it failed. And then he guest hosted the Artie Lang show.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Artie Lang. Please stay with us.
No, don't.
Don't
Hold
die.
on. You can't
Don't die,
badmouth Craig
Artie Lang.
Kilborn and then get on the Artie Lang bandwagon just because
I'm
it's
just
a
glad
hard
both
strike.
of them are still alive. I can just say that without being offensive.
I am super glad that people are still living.
Yes.
We can all agree on that.
Hopefully because they could listen to the show.
Yes. And
Please, Artie Lang, don't listen.
Artie Lang, if you're listening, turn this off now. It only gets worse from here.
Yes.
Artie Lang, if you're listening, would you like to be a guest on Record Breakers?
That
No.
would be hilarious. I don't know how good of an
Be a
episode.
guest on Record Breakers.
Yeah. That being said, something we can all agree on is that we're talking about music this week. And the provider of said music is none other than Drew. Drew, what do you got for us this week?
Well, I would like to say that we're talking about music this week, as you just said. Next week, who knows? We might talk about politics. No.
I do own preshowtheshow.com. Don't go
Word,
there.
and things are going to happen.
Yes.
Things are going to happen.
We have a great idea that entails these 4 yahoos and possibly a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
Be prepared.
That doesn't make any point about music. Yes. The not music part of our bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. But now we're talking about musical bullshit. And that musical bullshit comes from some folks out of the Boston punk rock and hardcore scene. This band formed in 1983. Didn't really get a big hit
Same year I was
until
formed.
this album came out. This album came out and sort of launched in my opinion, sort of pushed forward into the mid-late 90s, this big ska revival that was happening. It's a band called the Mighty Bosstones and an album called Let's Face It. Yes, there are some trombones. Thank you, Brett.
Let's Face It. It's an album called Let's Face It. Not the Cole Porter album, but the Mighty Bosstones album.
Funny thing you say that. Cole Porter is from my hometown.
Yes. I'll go with Patrick first. Patrick, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I am intimately familiar with this album. I listen to it regularly. I kind of knew exactly everything that I was going to say before I even wrote a note down on it.
Mm-hmm. Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I think like everybody that's been on this show ever, everybody that will be on this show, unless they're, well, I don't know. Squiggles may be too young. But we were all there when this album happened. This ska happened so quickly and had such mainstream success that there are people that had songs about selling out. It was less of a flash in the pan as swing music was. Remember that 5 seconds when people were like, "Oh, swing music."
Brian Setzer Orchestra and
yeah,
Sherry
well,
Poppin' Daddies.
Yeah, well, don't bring
Which are
Brian
bad
Setzer up
great
in a room with Squiggles. Brian Setzer is king, so let's just leave him
Big
out of this.
Bad voodoo daddy.
Yes,
fantastic.
I know people that went to swing dance lessons in that like 5 seconds that was a thing. But no, like the Bosstones have to be the pinnacle of success of ska in any era of ska. Like they have to have raked in as much of the gold that was then their hills, and seeing that they've been around for about as long as Petey has,
Yes.
which is longer than I've been around. Their longevity proves that they're at least able to do it for a long period of time. I don't know, but they're definitely one of the bands that got major radio play, and for good reason.
Drew, what would be the themes and elements that make up this record? How would you describe it musically?
Well, let's face it, came out in a long career, sort of towards the closer part to where their hiatus sort of happened in 2003. It came out in the mid-90s, and up until this point, the Bosstones were sort of known in the ska scene as having a very sort of fast, frantic sound. They very much took heavily from their like hardcore punk influences. It was very, very fast records, and it rarely even came close to 30 minutes. This record is 33 minutes long, and for a Bosstones record, that's pretty long. So the thing about that is they gave themselves more time in each song to really develop that, and sort of slow it down, take a chance, and like really let it every song linger. For some reason, that "Do You Have to Let It Linger" song just came in my head.
Yes, me too. I didn't want to say anything just because I didn't want to interrupt your flow.
Oh, no, I'll interrupt my own flow because that's how my mind works. It's that punk thing of you don't want to waste studio time because that shit costs money. But it's by no means a slow record for doing that, for letting things linger and bringing it out. There's still a lot of speed there. Brett was joking about it pre-show, which when pre-show the show comes out, you might hear some of. But Dickie Barrett's vocals are distinctive. He has guested on other tracks in like a background fashion, and they're like, the fans of this band will go, "Wait a second, was that Dickie Barrett on like a random Alkaline Trio song?" Like, well, it happens. I forget which song that is, but it's definitely happened before. He's very distinctive. He has a very growly vocal to him, which I think is really, really cool. The horns always provide just a really fun hook to like every song. I think horns in ska are its unique part, especially with that like ska core, like ska punk sort of sound. And if the horns have to be strong and they have to be good, and I think the Bosstones horn section is some of the best in ska music, period, let alone ska punk. So you have that. You have this guitar work that can, at the drop of a hat, go from sort of a surf punk sound to a heavy metal driven sound. The rhythm sections in this, the ska is known for having a great rhythm. And that rhythm section, the bass and the drum, like you can get something that gets the Rude Boys dancing, and then something that'll get the punks in the pit. Like, it's that unique sound that was what made the Mighty Bosstones what they were, and why, in my opinion, they are one of the best bands to come out from that time. One of my favorites, and I've been putting off doing this record because it's going to be one of these numbers. For the audio listeners, I'm
don't know
rolling
if it's
the
gonna be
dice.
successful.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. You got to roll the dice and take a chance.
That's 1d6 plus 4.
Yeah.
It is inspiration to me. and it is going to be one of those things because it's just the Mighty Bosstones to me are something that I will always love. I mentioned this before that I have taken after the band broke up that I was in. I sort of haven't been listening to as much ska. I sort of
Wait a minute, you were in a
myself from
band?
it. I was in a band.
What kind of band?
A ska band.
Oh, okay.
We were fucking garbage. No,
Garbage. You
You were
you
fucking
think you're
garbage?
paranoid?
I mean, you know,
I won't say anything about the word I used and the lead singer of that band. Let's move on.
She's attractive, but Butch Vig as well. I mean, he's
Right.
kind of a
You know,
handsome dude.
the Smashing Pumpkins really used his production to good effect. Like,
I think we broke through.
Little. No, but there's something that's really near and dear to my heart. And it's one of those things where they were the cornerstone of sort of an entire summer that happened. It was like them, Real Big Fish, and No Doubt were like a cornerstone of an entire summer. And Real Big Fish didn't really like, they moved on, they still tour, but like Real Big Fish has the same fans that they did before, whereas like Dickie Barrett and like the rest, like the Bosstones in general, have done other things since then that are different from what they were doing in the 90s. And they've still grown, and that is, in my opinion, a credit to them being good musicians and having a good backing for that. So
Patrick, well, how would you describe this album musically? What are the themes and elements?
Bosstones have some of the best bass lines in ska music, and like you sometimes got to listen for them, but there's always something good going on. The best snare tone in ska music. So getting a snare to like ping like that and have that crack and have it not sound like you're just hitting a steel chair with the butt end of a drumstick is something that people need to learn more how to do, and maybe listen to whoever mic'd these drums and engineered this record, because it sounds perfect. And Dickie Barrett's voice is so different and wonderful, and like this is an album I sing along to in the car fairly regularly. And I'm a terrible singer, but it's just it's feel good. It feels like 1997. I remember when The Impression That I Get came out. I was 11 years old. I've been listening to that song now for nearly 20 years. And that moment made me feel really old. But it sounds like a happier time. And I know that's really cynical, and I am a cynical person.
and you're wrong. But
No,
yes.
it wasn't. But
It sounds
The internet
at age,
sucked.
yeah, but life at age 11 was easy. You didn't have to have a job. You didn't have to do adult ass things. It's just it takes me back to
Adult ass things.
some of them were okay.
Life 13 was a little bit more confusing, but yeah.
But it takes me back to a more carefree time in my life.
Nostalgia. We can have thoughts on nostalgia, but yeah, shout out to Paul Q. Colderi and Sean Slade, the producers and engineers on this album. If we're gonna talk about the production,
guy that drove the train,
yeah,
the guy that gave all the money to the train to be driven.
yeah.
But
yeah, Brett.
I ain't got shit to say. Yeah, okay. There are two things on this album that stand out, and that'd have to be the bass guitar and the vocals. The bass guitar is fantastic. It takes what would otherwise be mediocre songs and really puts it out on top, lays a very, very strong foundation. The vocals do something that not a lot of vocals of this, like the genre and the neighboring genres, ever did. It makes it stand out to where when you hear the songs off of this album, you know exactly what you're listening to. Even a casual listener will be like, "Oh, that's Bosstones," or just we're getting into some of that. So you definitely knew what you're getting into. Otherwise, there's solid musicianship. There's it's very much. I said there was solid musicianship with the Aquabats. This is not the Aquabats. This is mainstream success, not like things that Brett listened to in his car when he drove his friends around, and there are funny smells coming out of the other people and their cigarettes. But no, this was like this is a band that really bases everything off the groove, which is what you kind of need to in a groove style ska band. That doesn't stray too far away from the genesis of ska. It doesn't break a whole lot of new ground, but what it does is solid, and it has a great foundation with the quality. Like, I mean, there's hot bass in the time when there was hot bass. Like, the people who are playing bass guitar in the late '90s are still the good bass guitar players today. So like there's some tremendous bass going on. The rest of it is, it's quality, but I think those two things really make it stand out more than the 8 million ska bands that we don't remember, but Drew lets us listen to again.
Let's just relive, for sure. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks?
Speaking of that, at some point, I should probably bring the likes of like MU330 and
butt trumpets. Gotta have butt trumpets.
Yes.
MU330. Mosquitoes breed in stagnant water. No, we'll do the thing I love to do. Noise Brigade. It starts out to get the rude boys' feet a moving, and it works. Noise Brigade is one of. There have been people in my past that are like, oh, we're going to your show and there's going to be ska bands there. Yeah. You dance to that, right? Yeah. People dance there. How do you do it? If I'm showing somebody how to skank properly, there's a webcomic called 21 Dead Monkeys. It already made the skank joke like 10 years ago. Calm down. No.
There may be listeners that do not know what skank is. Other than,
Fair enough. To properly dance the ska show, or to skank, as the kids call it, the rude boys and whatnot, the rude boys and skinheads like to skank at the ska shows. And I usually start with a slower tune, then I'll go to Beer by Real Big Fish, and then I'll hit Noise Brigade. Because Noise Brigade to me is the perfect song to dance to. Rascal King I loved because the Specials did it. Every ska band does it. It's the song about the rude boy in trouble. I mean, I could talk about Royal Oil's bass line being great. I could talk about That Bug Bit Me and Another Drinking Song being songs that are sort of in this weird place of like what alcohol means to people in ska, because there's a lot of people who drink in ska, but like it might not be great. Stuff like that. Let's Face It, I could talk about like how things like Skinheads Against Racial Prejudice and like Rude Boys and like ska in general are like so socially conscious. I could talk about how just absolutely perfect the song Break So Easily is, but the one to me, and I know I'm doing the Drew thing that Swagger talked about like weeks ago, where like I'm naming like every song, because like, but as I said, this album,
you're not wrong this time. You're not wrong.
Like
you're just doing
this
the Drew
band
thing.
is a special place in my heart. But I will end on how this album ends, which is 128. And 128 I think is great because while Noise Brigade gives you an idea of the perfection that is the Mighty Bosstones doing ska to me, and it is sort of that quintessential ska song with the Mighty Bosstones twist, 128 speaks more to what the Bosstones are like from a historical standpoint with their other albums. And that is, there is like the crazy like fast part that is taking from like hardcore punk and metal in the verses, and then like all of a sudden it's boppy happy ska in the choruses, and like it will switch on a dime, and you like the first time you hear it you won't see it coming, but every other time you You get where it's going, and you know it's going to hit you, and you know it's going to be a fun time, and that's what the Bosstones do. It's a fun goddamn time.
Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Double down on Noise Brigade. That is how you kick off a fucking album. Like, it's just like the opening is just wail on a snare drum 3 times and go for it, and it's perfect. You know, and it kicks off perfectly. You get Dickie's crazy vocals, which are like this deep, growly, wonderful, just something that is, again, there isn't a lot of, you know, it's music is a lot of guys with long hair singing really high, and this is exactly the opposite of that. 128, which the thing I really like about the Bosstones is that there's clearly a little bit of metalhead in that band, and they do get a little heavy sometimes, and it's just a really, really, like, the guitars get really heavy and a little bit thrashy in a good way, but also going on is this amazing descending bass line that just, you know, like, carries the song perfectly throughout. And then the elephant in the room, because it's the song that we've all been listening to for 17 or 18 years, The Impression That I Get. There are songs that, like, define a period that, like, when I think of the late 90s, that is the soundtrack of the late 90s, and in a good way. In the same way that, like, there's, like, when Hey Ya was a thing, that song just takes you back a couple of years to that era, and that was, like, everywhere. This song's been everywhere for, you know, 16 or 17 years, and we're still listening to it. And I don't know why I love it so much. I don't know. I understand, like, it's overplayed in a lot of people's minds, but it's such a good song. I think it's, like, one of those all-time great singles that just people who would never listen to a ska record love it. And it's still, you know, got all the horns and everything that you would expect in a ska song. It's not them doing anything other than what they do, but it managed to cross over to many, many people outside of their, you know, their comfort zone.
Yeah.
There's a good way to put that I just thought of. There are songs by the bands you enjoy that are overplayed, and when you're listening to the record that they are on, you will skip them. I never skip The Impression That I Get.
No, you can't. This is one of those, the beauty of the 30-minute record is that you sit down, you put it on, you don't touch anything, and you get to experience, like, a complete thought from a band. And this is a really, really good record, top to bottom.
Yeah. I will say, I will add the fact that there are. I have 3 Mighty Bosstones tracks in my karaoke repertoire. 2 are on this record, and those are The Impression That I Get, and I'm sure I've done Rascal King at some point. The other one's so sad to say, but that's on a different record, a few years later. But yeah, Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I had no problem with skipping The Impression That I Get on this album.
You're wrong.
No, I'm no correct. I am correct in saying that I did skip that track. I've heard that song so many times that I, can't help but hate it. It's catchy and well crafted, but it was, there are only so many times that a man can hear a song even perfectly crafted. I mean, Holy Diver. I would skip Holy Diver on a Devo album because I've heard Holy Diver so many times. And, the impression that I get, it ain't Holy Diver, but it's a pretty good song. No, I think that the impression that I get is of the tracks that people pull from an album and make a hit out of, and those that are as successful and mean so much. No, not Devo, Dio, Ronnie James.
You said Devo.
Sorry. But
Can we hear Devo do a cover of Holy Diver? Can that exist?
Let me get
Please
Mr.
let that
Mother's ball
exist.
up on
I
the
will.
phone.
I
I'll
will look
call
it
him.
up while you.
I'm pretty
talk,
sure I
Brett.
heard you say Devo on accident. which is why.
I could have. It's getting
Yes, you
late
did.
here in the Hoosier State, but no, of songs that are the track from the album, there are a lot worse songs that sound nothing like the rest of the album than that. It's pretty indicative of what you're gonna get with the rest of the album if you heard the weekly top 40. Numbered Days has an amazing bass line. Otherwise, it's pretty standard, punk ska progression. The bass line is played so ridiculously sweetly that it fills up the bottom half of all of everything that's going on in this track, and makes the song what it is. And Nevermind Me is a less horns, more rock, down to the overdrive wah behind the guitar solo, which is kind of neat for this album that I was not expecting. And mind you, I have heard this album before. This is not something that didn't show up at parties, that played on shuffle most of the time, with 6 other CDs that were in this large CD player that you hit the rant and it plays. You'd get a Holiday in Cambodia, and then you'd get the impression that I get, and then you'd get Dio doing Rainbow in the Dark. But
you sound like you had the same group of friends that I did, because that's
I hung out with a bunch of weirdos.
go.
Dio,
I still
dude.
hang out with a bunch of weirdos. Record Breakers, the podcast, is a bunch of weirdos that I hang out with. But no, I think that Nevermind Me is a song that if you punched up the drums would sound fine on a Pennywise album of the time. It's very much less ska, but ska adjacent sounding. But there are still horns. The horns play the root every now and then, and they do a really good job of getting the sound across. And I could pick out a bunch of other tracks on this album. I could do the Record Breakers, the Drew thing, and talk about the whole album. But I think that if you're going to pick out the things that I really went back to, and when I'm listening to an album and I want to distill things down to the things that I absolutely like and enjoy the most, I start out with a playlist and I start dropping songs until I get down to 3 or 4 songs, and those were the 3 that made the cut. They're going to be starters. They're going to be varsity songs on the Record Breaker, the podcast.
All state.
That's right. They're in good hands.
Yes. They got good fundamentals.
Right. Hustle.
Yes, they hustle.
What other ambiguous sports terms can we
Intangibles.
They got big heart.
Intangibles.
He's got basketball IQ.
Yes, basketball IQ.
That's right.
You got buckets.
He's got some field smarts.
Hold on, buckets is something you can quantify with a number,
sorry.
because they put points
what was
on
the
those.
other? What was the? Oh, God damn it! What was that?
If you can get buckets, you have a number attached.
There
that's how
was
many
the other
buckets.
term. There was the other term. You got. You've got
Court
handles.
vision.
Handles. Yeah.
Handles, court vision, basketball IQ are something that, when said, basketball fans completely understand what you're talking about. Nobody else gives a damn.
Yes.
Well played.
Yes. I was trying to come up with handles, and I don't know, that just escaped me. That being
That's
said,
that is what Allen Iverson had for his entire career until he went crazy.
that being said,
Handles.
This is not B-ball breakers nor rock and jock B-ball jam breakers.
Or Charles Barkley, Shut Up, and Record Breakers.
Yes. Guy Den.
I want to go ahead and play that game again.
Yes. This is Record Breakers. We'll talk about music. Let's go back around the horn with some conclusive thoughts. Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts down there?
This is a truly great record. If you so many bands who have a hit like this, they have a hit and the rest of the record is awful. We've had that once or twice on this show, I think. If you went and bought this album because you heard the impression that I get, you were not fucking disappointed. This delivers. It's so good in so many ways, and you should listen to it.
Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts on the album?
I do declare that if you're going to find an album to listen to of this genre, you could do a lot worse. This is probably on the list of must listens. It has to hang out at the
a
top.
lot worse.
Yeah. This is an album that if you're into the genre, you ought to listen to. If you're not into the genre, listen to it anyway, because that way, if you want to talk about how you don't like it, you need to at least have the ammunition and the knowledge behind it to tell people why you don't. And if you don't, you could still be correct. But there was something about the time and the kind of sounds that were coming at you from popular music and the era when the grunge music was dead. Although Nirvana T-shirts were selling at a neck break pace. And contemporaries to the Bosstones, Korn, Limp Bizkit, they're not once did somebody say that they were like a chainsaw on this album. So it gets like at least 10 points, 10 record
a
breakers.
motherfucking chainsaw.
What?
What?
There was
If we actually hit that perfectly in sync, I'm going to be so happy for that to be on the playback.
just a little off, but that's fine.
We didn't, but the heart was there.
Yes,
We had hustle.
the soul,
But
the heart and soul.
But you could do worse than this album, and you could do a lot worse. I don't think it's a life changing. It's not something that they're gonna put on your tombstone that I enjoyed. That my life was.
There's no Glenn
listening to the Bosstones
playing the part of G-Man, but it's still
Yeah,
mighty
there's no
fine.
U.S. pipe
No US pipe.
levels of greatness, but it was pretty okay. And I think that if you somehow have gotten to this far into this review and you have not listened to this album, you've probably done something wrong. Number one, like we've been talking about this album longer than the album is, most likely. So really, come
We're
on.
getting there. We're getting there.
But,
the haikus will push us over.
What you mean the main event?
Yes.
Which I think we're getting ready to get to. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Drew, go ahead and have the last word there.
As I said earlier, I've been sort of waiting on this record because I think this record is really sort of, in my opinion, it's an underhanded pitch. It's a softball. It's easy because there are bands, like I've said before, there are bands that are cornerstones of a sound. We did it last week with Devo. I mean, when you think of new wave, one of the bands that comes to mind is Devo. When you think of 90s ska, one of the bands you think about is the Bosstones. The Bosstones, unlike what Brett said, you could put the Bosstones as a liner note on my tombstone, and I would be completely happy with that, because what the Mighty Bosstones were, and the sound and what they did for the genre really did influence the music I listened to for a while. The reason I got into ska, and part of the reason I got into punk rock and got into underground music, was specifically the Bosstones. I brought this record specifically because it's the big one. It's the one that I think is most easily palatable for other folks. But there are other records before this, and like seeing the videos on like the local access channel that used to play like music videos that MTV wouldn't play. Like the local access channel that got the Trapped in a Box music video before Tragic Kingdom became a thing. Yeah. The one that got here's going way back, kids. The one that got the Waldorf Worldwide video before Young and the Reckless by Good Charlotte came out, or whatever that record was called. Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Like it was the local access channel that like played that sort of like weird underground music that was just starting to come up and bubble up, and that's where I was seeing those type of bands, and that's what grew me onto these genres, and the Bosstones were a huge part of that. I wouldn't have played the type of music I did. I wouldn't be into the type of music or have gone to the shows or met the friends that I did if it wasn't for something like the Bosstones. The Bosstones are something that, like, in the things that Drew will love until the day he dies, the things that he will be listening to and love, the Mighty Bosstones will be one that I will take to my grave. They are really good. Even if you don't like ska, if you hate ska at all, like if you hate all of ska, you just hate the genre in general, which I think is stupid, because it's such a varied genre. But if you hate the genre altogether, but you want to get into the mind of the Drucifer, there's not much better way to do it than the Mighty Bosstones. And this record is probably your easiest window in.
Mm-hmm. That is a great way to put it. Go listen to this album. Now we get to the main event of the evening, like was said earlier, to our haiku reviews. Let's see. We sum it all up in poetic form. I'll start with Patrick down there. What you got?
One song dominates, but the whole record is great. Hail Dickie Barrett.
Brett, your turn.
Gravelly vocals. Horns just when they're needed. Sounds of the 90s.
I'll go next. Ska punk veterans, all performing true to form with some attitude. And
Attitude? You got some fucking attitude?
Yes. Drew, what do you got?
I would like some attitude in WWF form, please.
Yes.
Bosstones created something magical in ska. Skank along with it.
Mm-hmm. We shall. And you can skank along with it as well at home on our Spotify playlist. Listen to this album and all of their previous albums on there. It's called Record Breakers Home Game. It's linked on every post. It's mostly updated fairly regularly. Mostly, kind of, a little bit. But you can play along with us at home. Follow along, listen to all of the records. Presumably next week's record will be on that playlist as well. We do have a guest. We don't know the album yet, but we'll look forward to that.
We should be getting
Huey
it from
Lewis and the news, sports. Whether or not it's the show episode, just listen to it. It won't hurt you.
Listen to some Huey Lewis in the news.
Yes.
He may, in fact, want a new drug.
Yes.
But my buddy Jason should be getting me the record that he wants to do. Knowing his loves in music, expect maybe some blues.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a easy bet. Either that or metal. He's a very weird dude.
Or blues metal. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yes.
I mean,
Blues, the news, 1 week of good listening.
Either way, I'll give you solid facts as well. My next album, barring just in case the guest episode doesn't happen, my next album will be something. I'll bring you back to Korea this time with a pretty popular producer by the name of Primary, and his album 2 as the number 2. So that's going to be my album, just in case, so you have something to listen to. That being said, that is next week and the following week. This is this week, the present. No need to look forward to the future. You have the present. You have here and now. Embrace it. But now we are at the end of another episode of Record Breakers. You can, of course, find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at HibbityBaird, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at X-Jucifer X.
Ex-Jucifer.
Ex-Jucifer.
I used to be a Jucifer, but no longer. I've converted away from Juciferism.
When he passes the police academy, graduates from police academy, he will be a Juicer.
That's right.
I was
For the
going to
can
make
of V8.
I was going to make a Catholicism joke, but
That being said, he's at X Jucifer X. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. YouTube.com/RebelliTV. Rebelli.net for this and other shows. Share, like, subscribe, do the things. Check us out. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Y'all.